I think some of his bio got cut off.
Yeah.
So,
You want me to read the whole bio?
no, you don't need to. Just do a summary. Yeah. He's at Baylor. You need to pull up my phone.
Yeah.
You know what? All right.
All right, if we can gather back here in the main room. All right, well, George is another one that I cold called about being vice president. And he had the wisdom to know that politics is not something that one should do when you have small children. So he had his priorities straight. And we've stayed Facebook friends since then, and I've enjoyed that. And George has been doing a variety of sociology research, going back about close to 30 years now. And has gone through some different interests, all of them interesting. I will tell you one thing though, that I credited him once with a book that he didn't write, because there is a different George Yancey that writes about some other things. But this is the George that we have the pleasure of having with us here at the party. He's currently at Baylor University. Before that, he was at University of Texas, North Texas. And it's all yours, George.
Hey, because I'm a professor, we will be doing PowerPoint. So here's the one way to think about it. I mean, there's a lot of ways you break things down. But you think about the Solidarity Party, there's three types of issues. There's issues such as abortion, where we probably fall more towards Republicans. There's issues such as the death penalty, for example, we fall more towards Democrats. And then there's issues such as ballot access, where we kind of disagree with all of them. I think race should be the third issue. I don't think we should sound like either of the parties on those two issues. I think both parties get it wrong. And that's the argument I'm going to make, and then I'll try to give a vision for a different option. I think that a better option. And so, because I'm a social scientist, I'm going to use a lot of research. I'm going to talk about different research projects. So this is, I won't say this is just not my opinion. You know, I think there's some more to it than that. So I'm sure, is this, no? Is it this? Oh, that's not good. Okay. No? All right, how do I make it go to the next one? All right, I'll do it this way. That's how I can go to the next one. Right. Yeah, which button puts it forward?
I don't think this button, no, you're gonna have to press it on the
I'll do that, okay. I'll do exercise it that way. All right, so let me first just break down, you know, I hate to start negative. Let me break down what I call a Republican view on racism and Democrat view on racism. And I'm gonna try to be as honest as I can with each view. In other words, I don't want to, it does nothing to distort them, to straw man them, you know, let's look at them, you know, from their point of view. So what would be a Republican view about racism? Well, racism, from a traditional Republican view, you know, with some exceptions, is something that's overt and that's from one individual to another. So for the Republicans, when you hear them talk about racism, they say, hey, racism, does it exist? Yeah, not that much. And when it exists, it's because of what one person does to another person, and it's very overt. And so for the Republicans, the solution is colorblindness. What we should do is we should ignore race. And here's the Republican Study Committee, you can see this. As Republicans, we reject the racial essentialism that critical race theory reaches, and I don't have time, I mean, I guess there's questions we want to talk about critical race theory, we can't, but we believe that individuals should be judged based on the content of their character, not their skin color, not their skin. And we believe that America's institutions should be colorblind, just as our Constitution is colorblind. the same vision shared with civil rights icon Martin Luther King Jr. I won't go into it. That is a controversial way of interpreting King Jr. I won't go into it because I've meant to cover. But that's the Republican viewpoint. The way to deal with race is that we treat everyone the same, regardless of their race, and we ignore it. We ignore us. We're colorblind to race. When I evaluate you for a job, when I evaluate you for a friendship, when I evaluate you for anything, we'll be colorblind. And this is an advancement from when I was younger, where it was okay to not be colorblind. I had a friend who, actually I had one friend, but and I remember when we were in grad school, she told me that she could not date people of color because her father was black. And when she became a mother of a teenage boy, he told her that if he was to say that he couldn't date someone because of their race, that he'd be charged as being racist. So things have changed as far as colorblindness. At one point in my lifetime, it was okay to not be colorblind. Republicans say, no, be colorblind. Treat everyone the same because of race. Now this sounds on the surface great. I mean, colorblind. Who wouldn't want to be colorblind? Well, if we had a truly fair society, then okay. And some, if you want to think about it another way, generally speaking, we can be hair colorblind. People really aren't systematically judged on their hair color. So if we want to say, hey, we're everyone exactly the same on hair color, and we're going to ignore hair color, then people say, okay, yeah, maybe you prefer blondes or brunettes or redheads, but no big deal. But is that true in our society, that we can do that on race? Is colorblindness viable? Well, let's look at some research. And by the way, I spend the next hour, if I've done this ahead of time, showing you research after research. I'm just going to show you about 3 or 4. This research shows that there's been no decrease in racial discrimination in hiring in the past 25 years. Now, over the past 25 years, there's been no decrease. And the reason why they know this is something called an audit study, where they take a black or Hispanic person and a white person and apply for a job, and they say it gets called back. For the past 25 years, they've done a lot of studies. The white person gets called back more often. And it's not just that they get called back more often and that's a decrease. It's not just that 20 years ago, they got called back more often, 20% more time, and now it's only 10% more. It's not decreasing for 25 years. So and the way they know this is that they use names. So like Leroy applies, not getting called back. I don't know, Leonard, is that a white name? Applies, get called back. Jose applies, not getting called back. Todd applies, getting called back. All right? So we know this. All right? Draw them all black. Draw them all black. The African Americans are pulled over more than European Americans, all things being equal. Now you might say, well, maybe we're fast drivers. Maybe driving a little more wild. They've actually done research on this. This study was in Ohio. There's been other studies in other states. And what they find is, unfortunately, we blacks drive as poorly as you whites. So it's not, and here's the clincher. You know when this does not occur? At night. You can't see to the car. So we know this is happening. Resident segregation. Resident segregation still impacts our educational outcomes. Now, I know some of y'all come from other parts of the country, and maybe you're more enlightened than us in Texas. In Texas, we have black sections of towns and Hispanic sections of towns. Maybe you all come from parts of the country where that's not the case. It is the case in Texas. The black sections of towns mean black schools. The Hispanic sections of towns mean Hispanic schools. I went to high school in Amarillo, and I went to the Hispanic school in Amarillo. I didn't go to the black school, I went to the Hispanic school. And our school sucked at just about everything but one thing, industrial arts. I mean, I don't know if it's still true today, but we would win the state industrial arts, it would not even be close. Like we had 150 points, and then the next second place got like 40 points. I mean, we were bad in industrial arts. We could build that house for those Hispanic kids. the 2 white schools in Amarillo, I know there's 3 now, but there's 2 white schools, you know what they're focusing on? Getting their kids in college. Now, there's nothing wrong with learning how to build a house. We need people who can build houses. And I'm not wanting to diminish that. But who's going to run the country? People who build houses or people who go to college? We have segregated schools, and it perpetuates the racial problems we have. And then this is evidence of the illicit practices in the healthcare profession, and how those illicit practices, how there's racism within them in the ways that people are treated, in what they're recommended. We know that sometimes they're recommended for procedures not based purely on their color, but they're more likely to. So we know that that's there. Now, why is all this important? If we're colorblind, it means we ignore this. If you listen to Republicans or conservatives talk about this, they say there's no such thing as institutional racism. What they mean is there's not someone saying you're black, therefore you're fired. Okay? And I will stipulate that that doesn't happen very often because we can sue them. But this is happening. So, when they say that, I think about just the first study. Okay, so there's institutional racism. Why is it that my name was Leroy? George probably just about to hook a little bit. My name was Leroy. And I apply for a job, I'm less likely to be called back for it. Just because of that, because there's a subject that I'm black. And then you can go down to the others. So colorblindness does not work. Does not work. All right, well, what do the Democrats have to say? The Democrats view about racism. Democrats will tell you that racism is structural as well as individualistic, and social institutions can perpetuate racism even when individuals do not intend to be racist. Okay? So it's structural. Some of the we just saw, in our healthcare system, in our criminal justice, not even getting into the criminal justice aspects. They're structural. And so it's not about the individual. So we have to change the structure. And the way to go about changing it is anti-racism. And that's another great name. I mean, who is pro-racism? Pro-racism. You're the Klan. Anti-racism. Sounds great. And we can see this in how Democrats treat it. And here's a Democrat California legislator. You can find more comments like this. We should be talking about mandatory training for anti-racism. We should be talking about diversity and inclusive training for all county employees. So anti-racism. So this gets us to the question, what is anti-racism? There's a whole controversy on woke and critical race theory, and people can't define it. But here's the thing of anti-racism. At 2020, in the middle of all of the racial strife, there's a lot of books on anti-racism out there. And I read them. And reading them, I found certain key elements that were just with all the books. In fact, I would say that these elements are almost universally accepted by people who claim to be anti-racist. So we're not talking about something that there's some disagreements on certain things such as can blacks be racist, but these are things that there's not really a lot of disagreement on. First, that racism is multifaceted. And by that, what I mean is it's in a lot of different areas, a lot of different institutions. It's not just in education, it's also in our educational occupation, justice system, our family systems, that's multifaceted, it's throughout our whole society. And so one of the things that anti-racists talk about is we need to change our society. We need a societal overhaul. It's not enough just to keep people from being racist and prosperous themselves. We need to change our society. It's also pervasive in our Western society, which means that it's not just a little bit in these different areas, it's deep. It's wide and deep in our societies. Now, some of this is like, I'm like, okay, well, I don't know about societal overhaul, what you want to change it to, but I can see all this. But this is the issue. And once again, I found this in some form in every book anti-racism I read. The role of whites is in people colorblind. Now, if you think that I'm exaggerating, you go read White Fragility, where she says, wouldn't it be great if whites just listen to people of color and say, I'll try to do better. Or you go read, White Supremacy and Me. Or go read Now, I'm done talking to white people about race. Or go read Kennedy's book. You know, that theme, to some degree, is in there. Why don't whites do what we were asking them to do? And that becomes problematic, because that comes into the designs of the programs that emerge from anti-racism. So, what does the research say about this sort of approach? You know, diversity training programs, we're very proactive, trying to change things. How successful has it been? Well, here's some research. Remedies centered on justifying moving resources from whites to non-whites can reduce resistance. In other words, when you say, look, you know, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take these remedies from these whites, move to the non-whites. What that creates is resistance. And what people will start doing is they'll start sabotaging it. Diversity training has little long-term effect on prejudice reduction. You know, from my religious tradition, you know, we often send our kids off to summer school camps. Mine aren't old enough for that yet. I'm waiting for the day where I can send them off, you know, a week of peace. And when I'm told the kids come back and, you know, and then they're like on fire. And they're making up their beds and saying, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. You know, they're eating their vegetables. And then about 2 weeks later, you know, the bed's messed up again. And it's, you know, and you know, they don't want to touch their vegetables. Because they had this bonfire experience and they went away. And they find that's what's true about the diversity programs. You can get an immediate prejudice reduction, but then about 6 months later, it's gone. Compelling whites to do anti-racism training can create a backlash to people of color. So it may be that, you know, the way white people about people of color is like about here. You know, we want to hear it's right here. They do the training and then it's here. Because there's a backlash. Because there's a resentment. In other words, you know, anti-racism sounds good, but it's not working. It's creating more tension, more problems. And this was an interesting study. And teaching about privilege creates less sympathy for marginalized whites, but does not increase the sympathy for marginalized people of color. So what happens is they think, okay, well, we'll teach about white privilege and we'll be sympathetic to people of color, and that does not happen. People are already sympathetic, they stay sympathetic. People are not sympathetic, they'll become more sympathetic. People who are sympathetic to people of color all of a sudden become less sympathetic to marginalized whites. You know, we just, you know, had a talk on single women who get pregnant. Well, if you're white, you get pregnant, you're a single woman, there's less sympathy for you after you've been taught about white privilege. Or if you're a substance abuse, or if you're homeless, or whatever the term for the day is. You know, there's less sympathy. So anti-racism sounds like, okay, yeah, we should have structural change, we need to have diversity training, and yet all the while, and by the way, when you read those books on anti-racism, look to see if they quote any study that shows that what they're doing is working. They'll quote research showing how bad the problem is, because that research is abundant out there. But the research, and I looked for it, there's a couple of small studies on certain professionals that shows, hey, this diversity training has some effect. That's about it. The meta-analysis showed that diversity training does not work. I'm going to go to a study later on that's really going to illustrate just how bad this can be. So, both approaches fail. The Democrats and Republicans failed. Why? And let me suggest why. This is the reason why. Both attempt to make others capitulate to a predetermined solution. The idea behind both is, here's our solution, you need to follow the solution, and then we solve the problem. If you do what I say, we'll have peace. Now, we know that that's always true, of course, you know. If people always capitulate to you, you will have peace, but is it really truly peace? And some people say, well, you know, is that only true about the anti-racism stuff? Because colorblind is just ignore race, right? I mean, well, here's an illustration. So about 2 years ago, I was looking for knowledge on that fountain of wisdom, which is Facebook. And, you know, I was talking about, you know, raising my boys. And my oldest at the time, I think was 5 or 6. And I was talking about how to talk to them about racial issues. And here I am, a race scholar, but this is the first time I had a 5 or 6 year old. So, I was looking for people that raise kids of color. And so I put on Facebook, hey, does any of y'all, how do y'all approach this? And I got some advice, but also got big pushback from some of my white friends who said, why are you even talking about race to your kids? Why do you care about trying to raise good black men? Because all my boys are, all my boys are men. Just raise good men. Raise good Christian men. The race isn't important. In other words, it's important to them that I raise my boys as colorblind. So this happens both ways. You capitulate to what we think, and we have to solve problems. I say that as a fundamental flaw that cannot work. Because even if you have good ideas, and I tell you, at times I am colorblind. When I'm grading my students' tests, I ignore their race because, being black, okay, but if you blew the test, you blew the test. At times I'm anti-racist. I'm very aware of institutional structural problems. If I try to make you capitulate, even if I'm right, one way to think about it is you can be right and wrong in the way that you express how right you are. So let me suggest what I would consider a better way, a way to think about it. And something I call a cloud conversations approach. And that is working together to form healthy interracial communications so we can solve our racial problems. So instead of capitulation, what we need to start doing is start thinking about it. And towards the end of this, I'll start talking about what we might be able to do in the public sphere. But just as a philosophy, is think about how can we have better conversations? Because our conversations right now suck. We talk past each other, we don't listen, and we try to win. And winning is everything. And get people to capitulate. What does empirical work say about healthy interracial relations? Under the right conditions, interracial contact helps alleviate bias. And there's a lot of research on it. I mean, I could have cited myself too, but I cited a couple of studies. But under the right conditions, interracial contact alleviates bias. There's less bias with people with contact. Now, under the wrong conditions, it can make things worse. The right conditions, it can make things better. We also know that having a common group identity increases positive feelings. And here's the example right here. So we're all members of the American Solidarity Party, right? And so we have positive feelings towards each other based on that, even though we may disagree on other things. We have positive feelings based on that. So, some of y'all maybe Yankee fans. Come on. We're still American Solidarity Party, so we feel kind of good, even though you root for the evil empire. But that's the thing. If we learn how to have common identity with more positive, we can actually solve problems rather than try to manipulate and try to demonize others. Families with collaborative orientation have more positive interactions in relation to each other. One of the things we're working on our course, and it's work, is we're trying to teach them how to solve their own problems. Now, part of it is I don't want to get into it. But also, I want them to start thinking about, all right, I want this, they want that. How can we get where we're each happy? Trying to start thinking, all right, what do they want, and what can I give them so I can keep much of what I want? I want to start teaching them that skill now early. Not just for racial issues, but just more collaborative orientation in their lives. And it's work to do. And we're not there yet, so and one of the questions is how do I do that? I'm still working on that. So, a climate conversation is an atmosphere of mutual support creates volitional compliance. Look, let me explain what happened a year ago, 2 years ago, with all the school board meeting stuff, right? All the protests, right? And everyone, the big sides, either they are go protesters or those protesters who are fascists. But here's what happened, if you really want to be honest about it. School boards for a long time have been run by the left. Okay, I'm just saying what's true. Or I'm not saying this right or wrong, I'm saying it's true. And thus, when they wanted to put curriculum in, they didn't take into consideration what people on the right or more traditional origin wanted. And during COVID, a lot of people discovered some of the they didn't want. So they started protesting. So this was not a collaborative situation. One group had power, the other group wanted to take away the power. And sometimes they did. You had a Virginia governor elected largely on that issue, Yancey. All right? Now, what are they doing right now? Are they saying, okay, now that we have power, we're going to collaborate with those on the left? No. They're saying, no, their power's trouble. And now those on the left are going to try to work to take that away. But if we had a collaborative orientation where we all had a say in the curriculum, then volition will choose to work with it rather than try to overturn it. The way we do race today is we try to overturn each other. The Supreme Court just cast it out for action. All right? Now, we can like it or not, and I particularly don't like that decision. But I understand the solution is not going to be to get power to put it back in. The solution is going to be to work with people to find something that will work. You know, that I can listen to the concerns of others and try to find ways of putting them into the form. That's the key that we're going to have to work on. Now, to illustrate this, let's discuss how you win arguments on social media. Let's just learn a little. So you learn nothing else, you learn this. So the way you win arguments on social media is this. And I'm taking a little break. I'll probably get back on Monday. But I'm a sociologist, so you gotta trust my judgment on these things. You clever insults. You find clever ways to insult people, and that will give you, that will help you, raise the likes, and people will go, yeah, and high five you, clever insults. I'm actually kind of good at this when I want to be, because when I grew up, everyone here is white, they may not understand this, but I don't know how to play the dozens. You all know what the dozens is? Yeah. Okay, one person, all right. The dozens is how you insult people in a very clever way. In the African community, that is certain pride. And so, I shouldn't have that pride, but yeah, it is what it is. You put your opponent in the worst possible light. You create a straw man. So here. All right, do they want more immigration? Well, they want the communists to come over our borders and take over our country. Do they want less immigration? They're fascists and racist. See, that's how that works. You just create the straw man, and then you just, make that your opponent's argument. You win when your opponent's bill goes all caps. That's beautiful. With all caps, it's like, so mad. And so they're mad, they look ridiculous, you look good. You're winning on social media. Tag others so they come to your aid, right? So you tag people so they can laugh at this helpless person, and then you can just pile on, and they may have some insults too to add. So that's also very good. Now this is how you can win on social media, and you can win on social media. But how do you convince anyone of anything? Research tells you no. In fact, the person that you are winning against probably has become even more entrenched in their beliefs, not less. There is research on how you persuade. How do you convince people? You build rapport. You find commonality. It's easier for me to agree with someone if I already have some rapport with them, have some commonality with them, than someone that I think is just trying to power. You identify areas of agreement. Well, people say persuasion tells you to find where you agree first before you get to the argument. Find those areas of agreement and pull together. Admit when the opponent has a good point. I know this one is a hard one. It chasts me too. But admit when the person has a good point. So think about it this way. If you never admit when they have a good point, then they think all you're going to want to do is just argue because it's just a single argument. And trust me, I've been on the other end thinking this person just wants to argue. Understand the person's argument. Don't straw man the argument. Understand why they would, have an attitude of curiosity. Wow, you believe that? Why? Why do you believe that? And look at what the person wants from other service. Because sometimes what people want is attention, sometimes what they want is security. Sometimes people are arguing things, but that's not what they really want. Sometimes you have to know a person know these things. Now, why did I point this out? The social media, I think when social media, That's how we're doing the race today. This is how we should do the race. We need to learn how to do race this way. This is what cloud conversation is about. And I don't have time to go all into how we can do this, but this is cloud conversation. Power versus moral persuasion. We get people thinking through power moral persuasion. Power touch is necessary because of shortcuts. So I'm raising an 8, 6, and 4-year-old. Trust me, sometimes power is necessary. If I did not use power, they would beat each other down. And the house would be total wreck, and they would watch, I don't know, they would watch Transformers all day long, and they would not eat anything other than, breads and sweets, Power is necessary. At times necessary. The bank, push off the bank. Does anyone want to go in and say, hey, why are you doing that? No, we want the only person arrested, right? There's nothing wrong with that. There are some people I do not want on the streets. All right? So power is necessary, but it comes short. Think about it this way. If you got what you got through power, then you try to maintain what you got through power. And you'll keep power at any cost possible. And what bad could come when people feel like they have to keep power at any cost possible? Moral persuasion, not power, is necessary to produce change. Power, you produce compliance. And sometimes you need that. Once again, sometimes you need compliance. To produce change, you have to do moral persuasion. How do you do moral persuasion? Well, I just talked about persuasion. Rapport. Develop, find areas of agreement. Moral persuasion builds community. Power builds compliance. So, part of, as I'm trying to understand, what the party's about, part of it, from my interpretation, is the need to build more community into our society. Well, we only do this with moral persuasion. I mean, we only create the atmosphere for it. That's the only way we're going to have a way to do that. Cloud conversation is about using moral persuasion instead of power. So you want to understand cloud conversation. That's basically what it is. Once again, I don't have the time to go into all the details. Now, does this really work? Here's the best comparison between cloud conversation and antiracism. Dobbins and College, a 2016 study. All right, they studied 829 mid-sized and large U.S. firms. They documented efforts to increase minority representation among managers, not the entry-level workers and managers, people who are in charge of stuff. What percentage of minorities were there? They documented what they were doing. And then they looked at the results 5 years later. So they documented what they were doing, looked at the percentage of managers of color they were, they came back 5 years later. All right? Here's what they found. Mandatory anti-racism training is correlated to decreased representation. So if you mandatory anti-racism training, also, if you interfered with how people were hiring, like you changed job requirements, and you set grievance committees, you have fewer managers posts 5 years later. If you brought white managers, most of our managers, into the conversation for increasing diversity, you had more managers 5 years later. So when, because I get pushed back from people anti-racism, hey, it won't happen, you just have a talk conversation. Actually, that's the way it's going to happen. Because when we try to force people to do stuff, they resist you. And it actually gets worse. And if you ever want to, and there's a readable, this article was in a highly right sociological journal, and most of us don't read it unless we actually have to, like myself. But there actually is a readable article out there called Why Diversity Training Fails, or Why Diversity Fails. So if you ever want to read it, that is a readable article. Okay, implication of this approach. No one has all the right answers. We got to get better answers from listening to each other. We got to develop an intelligence to each other. I've been doing research on race for over 2 decades. I still need to listen to others. We need intentional efforts at cloud conversations. This is not going to happen by accident. We can't just jump on and say, hey, let's just talk. And we got to talk more about that. The needs of everyone must be respected. I want to be clear about something. I don't think that a lot of times the answer is going to be everyone has the same responsibilities, because we've had centuries of racial abuse in our society. All right? So I'm not saying that the needs of everyone is alike, but it has to be respected. Because if you don't respect people's needs, then they're not going to work with you. And they can understand, hey, maybe we need to give more. But if you have no respect for me, then why? Skills of active listening and productive communication is valuable. Listening and productive communication. And we work for solutions that are win-win instead of win-lose. We want solutions where people feel like, okay, I got something, I may not got everything, because you don't need everything, but I got enough. I'll work with you. When we go for these win-lose solutions, like on the affirmative action thing, hey, we won, you lost, then people have incentive to sabotage. And so that's all there is to it. So if I was president of the United States, or if Brian had won, he's obviously his advisor right now, what would I say? There's things that you could do for the government. You could encourage curricular influence on private conversation instead of anti-racism. I'm not opposed to people protesting some of the anti-racism being put into schools. I just said don't call it critical race theory. It's not. I'd rather have something that's all focused on how do we communicate better with each other than the anti-racism. Something like white fragility, which if they're talking about white fragility in my set of schools, I would protest that. I just wouldn't call it critical race theory. I call it what it really is. Train mediators for dealing with police community situations. Train people on how to engage conversations to turn temperatures down but to find solutions. And do this while we don't have a shooting that's happening. Try these conversations now so that when the controversy comes, we're ready for it. I tell Brian to use the bully pulpit to encourage collaboration instead of conflict. Political leaders can do that. And fund research, of course, I'm being selfish now, to have more productive conversations. Because all the research is on these other things. And, someone like he gets $10 million from the president's, I forgot where, but the guy who's person had $10 million to give to Kennedy, for research that's not going to go anywhere. Fund research, how to have more productive conversations? How do we learn how to turn down the temperature? So those are some of the things I would consider. And then one last thing, and then I'll open up for questions. If you want to learn more, I do have a book out, and you can get 40% off if you want to take one of these, Beyond the Racial Division, where I do go more into what I mean by active listening and how we go on this. So with that, I don't know how much time I have left, but I'll take the other questions.
John Perkins, Texas. Do you have any suggestions for applying these principles when discussing things with people who don't believe racial discrimination is a problem today, even when presented with this sort of evidence you mentioned earlier?
Sure. Okay, so that's a very, very practical question. Let's be realistic. There are people on both sides who are not ready for this conversation, all right? So the extremists, colorblindness, and the extremists anti-racism both will tell you, no, we can't have conversations, we have to have our own way. What percentage is that? I don't have a great survey for that because no one really looked at that. The best one I have is a proxy on critical race theory, and I use it simply because how people understand it probably is in those ways. And in that survey, about 20% of the people love critical race theory, but 25% hate it. 55% are in the middle. Okay, so if that's correct, if you have 55% of people who are not so extreme that they could be persuaded, let's talk with them. Because I've had the unfortunate experience of banging my head against the wall, trying to talk to someone. This happens from on the right, but I can have this experience talking to someone on the left too. Talking to someone who simply does not want to have a conversation. And so I've learned to save my energy for people who are open to having a conversation to some degree. Doesn't have to agree. I mean, if someone say, look, I don't think racism is so bad. Can you tell me why you think it is? That's an opening. Someone who says, well, institutional racism is just a farce that people are doing, and you give them one example, and they just say, well, then you know that just be their friend until they're ready to have the conversation. So I wish I had a better answer than that, but you're not gonna be able to. Oh,
So as someone who is not a racial minority, what do you think the appropriate was, how should white people advocate for racist issues without being, I mean, there is that issue of speaking for the other, someone you want, right?
yeah. So what I would say is, look, in the conversation, everyone, including white people, has to have a seat at the table. So if we create the right environment, you should express how you feel, however that may be, on issues. Because if you're concerned, people are all brought out, because if they're not brought out, then when solutions come, you're not going to support the solutions. So what I would say is, when it comes to having a conversation, we all have equal responsibility to create an environment, no matter what our race is, and to learn how to listen to others. Now, the solution may be different, but the conversation, we all have equal responsibility. That's what we have to push. Yeah,
I want to make a little clarification. So say I'm in a conversation and it's all white people.
Okay.
And some people start saying things that I think seem kind of racist.
Yeah.
I'm a white person, but I'm thinking like, I want to speak for black people, and it seems like, I don't think that's appropriate for you to make these judgments.
Yeah.
How should that conversation work whenever it's like, we're making assumptions, we're all of a sudden making assumptions about people who aren't in the room?
Yeah. Well, I think that my answer to him is kind of similar, is that there's a certain percentage of people that are not ready for the conversation. So you give feelers out to see, are they open to learning a different perspective? If they are, then yeah, maybe it's something to pursue. If they're not, then trust me from my experience, it's not worth it to educate against them. It really is not. You get yourself worn out and you don't make any headway. And it sounds bad, but it's just the reality. So, I would just sort of, get some feelers out there, and then if it's clear that, if their mind is made up, just talking about something else, talking about, do you see any live action play stuff? Talk about that. So, yes. We know each other, so I just
Is age an important variable in racism? I mean, is racism partly or largely a function of the age of the?
Are you talking about racial attitudes, or just in being able to do this, or?
No, more so about like is like a little kid, a newborn baby isn't racist, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe an old wise person isn't likely to be racist, maybe, but
Yeah.
is there like some peak age or the propensity to be
Uh,
racist?
Age is not as important as people think that it is, but there's probably, depending on what models you look at, there is some importance to it. It could be a cohort effect, we'll have a certain cohort of time, have certain attitudes and that sort of thing. Actually, the biggest predictor of race is not age, and it's not region, it's not even racial identity. The biggest predictor of racial attitudes is political ideology. Political ideology, that's the biggest predictor. So there's all sorts of interesting implications behind that. So does age matter? Yeah, but it's really not, it's not the thing that I would look to. Yeah.
So George, it's great that you think this should be the ASP's position on race, but we're small, right?
Yeah, that's our somewhere.
So who else do you try to convince of this?
I have talked to, I'll talk to anyone. I have talked to mostly Christian congregations, and most of them are fairly conservative. And in all honesty, while I hit my head against the wall both ways, I've actually got more an audience among conservatives and progressives on this. But like I said, I'll talk to anyone on this. I would love for our solidarity party, for this to be wherever we're coming from. We're small, but you know what? Let's get big enough to where people want to steal our ideas. That's one time stealing is okay. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could point to any models in communities or that'll represent some of these policies and this
Yeah.
approach, and the effectiveness.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a member of, I think called Better Angels, and they've done some really cool stuff. I mean, I talked to them a couple of times, and then I get busy, chasing my 6-year-old and telling, keeping them from like 20 to 4-year-old. But they've done some cool stuff. Now, not on race per se, they've done one thing on race, but they have sort of this philosophy. I think historically, from what I can tell, the Pioneer Farms, I don't know if you know about that, they're in Georgia. They had this interracial community where they worked out their problems. They don't exist, but they seem to have this sort of perspective. So there's bits and pieces, but obviously not systematic. Yeah.
George, do you have optimism? Listening to your presentation and to the response to questions, what's your long view for this country and its attitude toward race relations, improved race relations?
Yeah. I don't think it's going to get there in my lifetime. I'm hoping it gets there in my kids' lifetimes. I think it can. I think it's a long term. I think being overly optimistic and hey, we do this in 5 years, we're gonna. I think that's fool's gold. But I do think in the long term, and I'm working for a long term solution from my end of things, trying to do research, try to raise money for that sort of research, and to because I think if you get the research piece down, all of a sudden now you go to people and say, hey, look, we know antiracism doesn't work. This works. Why don't you do this? No, that's a long term hype.
Do people who adhere to both of those two ends of the spectrum as you described realize that it's not working? Is there any?
That's a good. That is a good question. I mean, we can convince people. We can convince ourselves against the evidence on something if we want to believe it. And my thinking is that people on both sides have social interests in not wanting to, and so they can keep convincing themselves that this is working. But in my book, I talk about just the cycle that comes on. You have the racial incident, and then the riot, and the counter riot, and then equilibrium, and another racial incident, and it's like the insanity of doing the same thing over and over again. So it's a different result.
Hence my question earlier as to what your long-term view is.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to say, hey, we really work hard. In about 5 years, we'll be there. But I think that's not realistic. I'm working for my boys.
Just a real quick follow-up on that. I think that's a great question. Did I hear you right? That we quoted the number. You said 20% on one side and 25% on the other side.
Yeah. But I mean, you can't.
Yeah, that's really rough, obviously. Yeah. But that sounds optimistic because there's 55% in the middle. That's the majority.
There's 55%. Some percent, don't care about anything.
Oh, okay. That's true.
I mean, there are some percent don't care, but I think that 55% is the starting place because what if 25% of people became passionate about this, and you had a competing group that gets the others? I think that starts changing this because now, when you put MSNBC or Fox News, they have to have us on there too because we represent them. Right now, they can ignore us because there's not enough of us for their attention.
Well, thank you very much.